Jamon Alexander. I am with West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology. Really excited about the conversation here tonight. Honored to be with this wonderful group of people who are doing some amazing and incredible things in the DEI space. So just so we have a sense for what the evening is going to look like, I'm going to ask each one of you to take maybe a minute or two just to introduce yourselves, sort of, who you are, what you do, why you care about what you do, and why you care about the work of DEI. And in this conversation we're having today around pathways to equity. And then we have a set of questions that we want to ask you that were inspired by our conversation the other day, right? So no need to, Skot goes first and Lisa goes, no, just conversational, hop around. And then also, we welcome and invite each one of you to, to ask some questions as well of our panel. So maybe we'll start with just a little bit of level setting, right? You all obviously are familiar with Confluence as a series, a thought series. But just to remind us, it's to highlight the ways in which West Michigan is moving the world forward in all areas of tech innovation. So this year's theme is health and wellness, with a focus on medtech, digital health, and health equity, right? And that's really the space that we're gonna lean into here today. So there's 24 total thought leaders over the course of the series, exploring groundbreaking devices, services, and inclusion strategies that are improving outcomes for community and revolutionizing care, right? So that's the overarching theme of the series, and we're gonna dig in a little bit deeper here. Also, just to ground us in the conversation, just wanna acknowledge what's happening right now. Many of us witnessed the death of Patrick at the hands of a Grand Rapids Police Department officer. There's a trauma associated with that for, specifically his family, with him and his family, and then also those of us, as he was a member of our community. So I think it's important that we acknowledge the tragedy that happened. And also, frankly, that example sort of speaks to some of the duality of Grand Rapids, right? There's skepticism around this work, and I think we can speak to that a little bit around this idea of DEI work from people who have been on the wrong side, frankly, of oppression. And there's also skepticism in the work when we talk about language like white supremacy and white fragility, right? So we want to bring all that into the space, acknowledge it, and sort of speak to some of that tension that exists. Sound good?
Great.
Would like to start with just some intros. Again, your name, all the things that you do, things that are important to you, and why this matters to you. So for this case, we'll go in order, and then after that, the questions will be more conversation.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. Skot Welch, founder, principal of Global Bridgebuilders, also managing partner of the New Community Transformation Fund. I've been working in DE&I globally for the past 25 years, and was the vice president of benchmarking and analysis for Diversity Magazine as well. So my focus was the Fortune 500. That's where I work, but my backyard was always in Grand Rapids. And my kids are fourth generation Grand Rapidians, so we kind of know this place pretty well. But I've just been so blessed and fortunate to work with so many amazing organizations around the world. Our focus at GBB actually is metrics. We have a proprietary tool that's the only one of its kind that brings together the Baldrige and DE&I. And so we're very, very metric focused, very comprehensive, and our processes are very, very rigorous. And we have a good time with our clients when we work with them. And then, of course, the work for New Community Transformation Fund is a $25 million fund that we started with my colleague and I, Bergen Close, Right Place. And we have since actually just a month ago started also New Community Transformation Fund Denver as well. So that's a $50 million fund. But I just love my community, right? And it's interesting too, because some of the conversations that people run away from, I run towards. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, because I actually serve clients in Minneapolis too that are concerned with George Floyd. So I've been a part of that entire, that situation as well. And so to see Patrick murdered, unfortunately, I'm familiar with that because I'm working with the folks in Minneapolis as well. And so I'll stop there. I'm involved in a number of different things. I love our young people. Started something called the Mosaic Film Experience for our young people. Serve about 33,000 kids at this point in time. I'm a foodie and married for 29 years and 2 amazing kids. One in Los Angeles, one at Howard as a senior. So nice to see everybody.
So my name is Lisa Lowery. I have multiple hats, but I serve as the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Cultural Initiatives for Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. I'm actually a clinician. I see patients. So I'm an adolescent medicine provider. So most people don't know what that is, but I take care of teenagers and young adults. So that's DE&I right there. I'm a native of Grand Rapids, left and came back, left and came back, and left and came back. Just, I guess why I do this work is because it's just a part of what I do. My family served in the community. I serve on many boards, but the reason I do it is just because it's just a passion of mine. I think for me, you are give back to your community because so much has been given to you. And my goal is actually to make it a better place. Most people don't know that this building is the College of Human Medicine. Most people don't know that the College of Human Medicine, our Grand Rapids campus, is actually the largest campus for the College of Human Medicine. Unfortunately, most of our students of color, even though they may come to Grand Rapids or East Lansing, one of their first 2 years choose not to stay in Grand Rapids. So they go to one of our community campuses, either Flint, Southeast, and then as we partner with Henry Ford, and because of the cultural environment in West Michigan. And so actually approximately 2 or 3 years ago, Dr. Dean Welch, who I think spoke yesterday, along with our current dean, Dr. Sousa, and my boss, Dr. Wyman Lipscomb, created this position that was to not only be here as a support for our students, but also work on things like faculty development, cultural diversity, all those things. So that's what I do.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robyn, Afric. I serve as the first director for diversity, equity, and inclusion all the way in Ottawa County. So I think I'm the only one representing, right? But yes, raised there, grew up in Ottawa County in Holland, Michigan, Holland. And our office was created to actually come up with a DE&I strategy to help operationalize and sustain the work within our county. So the role that I've stepped into is to really figure out how to do that within our policies, procedures, and programs, and then in addition, partner with our local municipalities, townships, and villages to do the same. So there's other items that we're working on, but those are kind of the 2 big pillars. And beyond that, I'm involved, like Scott, right, just serving on different boards, and I'm an elected official for the OAISD school board as well. I have 3 children. We were joking earlier about I'm a newly empty nester, so our youngest goes to Howard. My second is almost graduating from UChicago in public policy, and my last one is like 3 years out already from Notre Dame. So we're pretty glad about that. So.
Just don't do what I did, become an empty nester and then move your in-laws in. So.
Oh my God, that's your fault. You did that.
This isn't being recorded.
Darius, I'm so hurt.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darius Quinn. I'm a Human Resources Manager for Kent County. Worked for your local Kent County here for almost 23 years, primarily serving in roles as employee relations, labor relations. For many years, carried our DE&I function, so now serve as a senior DE&I consultant internal to the organization. I'm pleased to have my Director of Public Health with us this evening, Joanne Hoganson. Hopefully you're able to take away some nuggets from this conversation this evening and incorporate into our provision of service at the Kent County Health Department. Friend and mentor Scott Welch moved me into the consulting space a number of years ago, so I'm appreciative of that. Done a lot of work along with Scott and others to help create a more inclusive downtown, serving on boards for the last 12 plus years, and helping to identify third space recently, we soon will become empty nesters, and then from there, we have some guests with us that will be with us for a while. So, that's me in a nutshell. Looking forward to this conversation this evening.
Absolutely. So thank you all for the introduction. So you can see we have quite a bit of experience here on the panel. We're representing the public sector, private sector, healthcare, Ottawa County, Kent County, so wide range, right? So let's just get into it, right? So like DEI efforts, both with public entities and private companies, often reflect the will and the temperature of the community. DEI is not being done the same way in communities across Michigan, frankly, not even across West Michigan. There's probably some differences between Ottawa County and Kent County. So like, what are some unique challenges that Ottawa and Kent are facing? What can we learn from other communities, regionally, nationally, perhaps even globally? And that question is open to anybody who wants to jump in first.
I'll go ahead and jump in, only from the standpoint, it's funny, Robyn and I are friends, but we also, her boss that hired her used to work at the county, then he went to Ottawa County, and then now he's back at Kent County serving as our county administrator controller. And for many years, I've always said, your DEI efforts move at the pace of your leader, right? You as a DEI officer, you can't push the work further than your leader is willing to go. That individual sets the tone. And fortunately for us, we have a county administrator who is experienced, who has experience implementing, as Robyn mentioned, creating the first ever DEI office at Ottawa County. So we're well positioned to move this work forward within the organization. And those of you who are residents of Kent County, you should take, I guess you should take pride in knowing that. However, some of the unique challenges, we started out with them already, right? I think for us, our immigrant populations and how we welcome individuals into this community is a significant issue that we have here in Kent County. How Mr. Leoyo was treated, right, is an example. And that's not rendering a decision as far as his guilt or innocence, the officer's guilt or innocence. But I think many of us who even viewed the video can understand and maybe respect the fact that we have some work to do as it relates to interacting with those from different backgrounds. And that's probably way too political, but there's still work to be done there. So how we welcome new individuals into our community, I think is a significant issue among many.
Other thoughts?
Well, just to piggyback off that, I think there's a culture of West Michigan, and what we have to realize is, we are battling, if the Great Resignation has shown us anything, we are battling to get great talent. So first of all, we're in Michigan. And so for some people that it's still cold in April, that's not a selling point. So we have to realize, we have to say, then I have to compete with Chicago, then I have to compete with Detroit, then I have to compete with Indianapolis. And so then I think we have to acknowledge that. And sometimes we thought, we're Grand Rapids, we're West Michigan, we're a great place to be, cost of living. But you have to acknowledge some of those core factors, so that's one. But then I think you have to say, okay, how do we do that? How do we welcome people in? How do we they spoke about it last time, intentional about welcoming people in. Grand Rapids, I was talking to a young person the other day, I'm born and raised, my family still lives on Franklin Street where I grew up. But Grand Rapids is a very, very closed city. And so how do we have a culture of welcoming to Grand Rapids? And then I also have to say, you have to get people out their bubbles. So some of the students, and I'll just say with the medical students and residents, because I interact with all of them. I even told people at Spectrum, when you get people in Grand Rapids in there and you're showing them houses, maybe not show them houses, and no disrespecting by be careful where you're showing them houses. Are you showing them the houses in Rockford? Who can you meet with? So you have to have that intentionality. And so I'll pause there, but I think we have to acknowledge some of those things and then be intentional. I mean, we can't change the weather, but I can definitely tell you, you know what, we got a great airport that has a direct flight to Florida, and those are the things we have to acknowledge. And so that's just one of the things.
Yes, what I hear you two talking about is a sense of belonging, culture of community, and ensuring that not only can this continue to be a great place to, to work, to worship, to drink beer, all of these things, right? But it also must be inclusive for everybody, right? That's what I'm hearing. So maybe Robyn, will transition to you specifically. Can you just sort of help talk about the landscape a little bit now in counties, like what's happening on the Lake Shore? What sort of challenges are you facing? In what ways are they the same or different from what you're hearing tonight?
No, I think some of those themes about, again, West Michigan, right? We've heard the West Michigan nice, the West Michigan culture. It's definitely there in the Ottawa County space as well. And I think, most people who you will talk to in the business leadership realm, right? The talent dynamic is absolutely a conversation that we're having. I think when it comes down to, I think the first question you asked, what was the first question? I'm so sorry about it.
Yeah. So it was like, what are unique challenges, and like, what can we learn from other communities? Yeah.
I mean, if I put my practitioner hat on, and I think, I'd love to hear from the other groups here too, but it's so challenging in the sense that if people are trying to do this work of DE&I and they don't understand their why, right? That's central to managing and setting expectations and the long haul. I think the second area that I sense or can tell usually is definitions. So when you get groups of people together, say we're all for DE&I, what does that really mean to each person? Because it's assumed until you might hit a certain point at which you're creating a policy or you're having a discussion around your accountability metrics, and all of a sudden, wait, you mean that about diversity? I meant that about, right? And so there's that piece. I think people confuse the difference between compliance and culture. You need both. They're two sides of one coin, but oftentimes one might be heavier in the other, and the other might say, well, we don't need one because we have the other, but they actually are one. One will support the other depending on how you set it up. So, and it's really about expectations and accountability. So I think those are some honest challenges, but if you can't get to those root things, it doesn't matter what you're gonna do. It might default then to it could be a tokenized, attempt versus an actual sustaining transformational change.
So, Robyn, you actually raised a good point here, and perhaps is where we should have started. Why does any of this matter? Like, why should we care about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why should the folks who are here tonight care about diversity, equity, and inclusion? There's some great places here to live, to learn. If you're hanging out on Wealthy Street, great places to eat, great places to drink. Like, why should this be a priority for West Michigan?
It's the same. You want to go ahead, Lee?
No, go ahead.
I'm close and listen and learn. So one of the things I think, it's interesting. So our motto for our company is innovation through inclusion. And I always tell folks, I've met plenty of people that have baggage about DE&I, but I've never met a person that's had baggage about innovation. And the thing is innovation and heterogeneity are connected. So there's several stories of studies from the Wharton School to Towers Perrin, University of Michigan, Ford Motor Company in Germany. The list goes on and on and on. Heterogeneous groups are just more innovative. Now I'm gonna be just real blunt. So homogeneous groups are dumber groups, right? Heterogeneous groups are actually smarter groups. And so the question is not who's at the table, the question is who's not at the table. And so oftentimes I find, and this is whether I work in, Singapore or Savannah, it doesn't matter. The point is that I find that though people articulate a desire, they talk about DE&I oftentimes, they really want to be comfortable. And I always tell folks, particularly in this day and age, if you want comfort, go get a quilt, because this is not the time for comfort. And I find that organizations that want to go after innovation are innovative. And that's why even Wall Street, their earnings per share for for companies that have women on the board actually is it's higher. Because they know that homogenous groups are less innovative. And here's the thing. You look around, like we got snow. We're all professionals at that if you live in Michigan, right? So no snowflake is the same. That's one thing. We want diversity in our portfolio investment, right? To minimize risk and maximize return. Even the ecology is saying diversity, from the birds to the photosynthesis to the leaves on the field to the trees. If we don't have diversity, we die. And so it's funny because I don't really deal with, I think it's an amazing thing. Social imperative, absolutely. Kumbaya, goosebumps, all those things. But organizations that don't grasp diversity, their time is limited, right? Just ask Circuit City. Just ask Blockbuster. I can go through a list of things I talk about all the time. That when you get in a room where everybody's agreeing, you're in a room that actually is about to compromise something. You're going to compromise because you don't want to offend somebody. But the thing is, like Henry Ford said, if I would have given the people what they wanted, I would have created a faster horse. Right? And so innovation is the gift that keeps on giving, but you have to connect it to diversity. Because diversity in and of itself requires something, right, for folks to come together. And you have to be different to come together. And that's the kind of the cool thing about it. Because of West Michigan, and I know it well, what I've seen, Jamon, in traveling, one of the things is that organizations or companies that get it right is that three things. They're intentional, they're transparent, and they're relentless. And I don't care if that's a community or that's a company. That see the same traits. And they also understand the difference between welcoming and belonging. Welcoming, an inanimate object can do that, a sign can do that. But you can only belong to other human beings. And see, that's where the real, because life happens in real time. So welcoming is okay, but you know what I found in our studies? Is that people that feel welcome, they leave.
And when you say our studies, is that national, is that local?
So I created something called the Belonging Index. And if you want to go online, belonginginitiative.us, it's all there with the National Civic League. And we study that. And so it is a national footprint, and we find that people that simply feel like they're welcome, they leave. And so organizations say, well, doggone it, we got a great strategy, and they just keep leaving, like, because they only feel welcome. You can only belong to other human beings, right? And I remember when I first met Robyn, our history was way back, and Darius, and now a new friend with Lisa, and you, Jamon. It's the reason that people stay is because they feel connected. And you nailed it. You said, West Michigan, it's a great community, that's why we're still here, but it's very insular and it's very provincial. And I can say it because my granddad was here almost 100 years ago. And so if we want to win, and I know we love to win in West Michigan, if we want to win, we're going to have to actually be uncomfortable and become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Because that speaks to our maturity. So I'll stop there because I can just.
Yeah, so on these lines, you're talking about equity and innovation, not as a moral imperative, but as a necessity for survival and for thriving, right? For the private sector, for our community as a whole, right? So without that, we're at a competitive disadvantage. And if we want to win, we want to be an attractive place, we continue to struggle to recruit Black and brown talent. And when we do recruit, to your point, there's not a sense of belonging. So folks leave, right? But like, we're also home to global leaders in the private sector. And I think Dr. Lowery will attest some world-class care here and wonderful facilities, natural assets like Lake Michigan, out in Ottawa County, right? So in philanthropy, right? Like cultural philanthropy here embedded in the fact of who we are. So when you add all of this up, like, let's talk more about some of these challenges. Let's get a little more specific in terms of like the sense of belonging. Like, what is it that dominant culture misses or misunderstands about, I was gonna say, like, frankly, your needs, your wants, our needs, our wants. Like, where's the disconnect? What's being missed? And perhaps this might be an opportunity to talk about that third space you mentioned, or dig a little bit deeper into the sense of belonging stuff.
Yeah, so when we talk about third space, we're talking about what keeps an individual, a new individual who's in your community, right? That first space, if I am new to this community and I move here, for example, for a job, great compensation, right? That's worth the move. In particular, I might find a great place to serve, a religious house. But what's here for us socially, right? So Scott and I, we've done some work over the past, 15 plus years in helping to create a space where communities of color in particular can feel a sense of belonging. We've put in countless volunteer hours in helping to create this environment through some of our work with the Grand Rapids Kent County Convention Arena Authority, Experience Grand Rapids, any number of organizations. So that's sort of one area, but making sure what's missing is having folks with a voice at the table. I think Darren, I believe it was, who we heard part of your talk, and making sure that folks are at the table, helping to come up with solutions for themselves. I thought that was powerful. I mean, it's oftentimes overlooked. So that's just one thought that I'd like to offer.
Yeah, I really, what you said about belonging and diversity and what's missing, I do think it is that connectivity, and how do we connect people? And that's the thing, and that's hard. Because you can welcome somebody in, you can hire them, but then how do I say this is the place for you? And it's so multifactorial. And whether it's what do I have to entertainment wise, well, I have that one concert I can go to every 3 months, or where in my space I don't see anyone that looks like. So it's all about representation. And I do think when we're planning and being innovative and doing those things, it's like who's at the table, who's not at the table, why aren't they at the table? And don't say because we don't have any, then why don't we have any? And it's that layer, it's that uncomfortability, it's going out and seeking. And so I think those are, and again, you're gonna hear it a lot, intentionality. Those are the things we need to do. We need to own up to the statistic that, what is it, one of the worst places to live for brown and black people, and why?
Yep.
And then what do we need to do about it? And that's not gonna change overnight. Yep. And it's so many layers. But I do think that how do we connect people is at whatever level, and it's at, I'll tell this story because I told it on the Zoom meeting a few days ago. There was a colleague of mine, she was rounding in the hospital, and she saw another African American doctor that we didn't know. Well, so we were like, because we have to know everybody, because that's my role and so she follows the person into the charting room and looks at her and goes, "Hi, who are you? What's your name? How long you been here? And please don't leave." Now the joke, that's the run joke, but to this day we are still friends. So my one friend reached out to her, and we have a bond, we have a sisterhood, those things. It is that intentionality. Now, unfortunately, she left town. It was a lot just to be kind of closer to family, but to this, we're still linked. And so those are the kind of connectiveness things we have to do.
So I want to give both Robyn and Skot a chance to respond to this question, but because Dr. Lowery just spoke, I want to connect this back. We're talking about health equity too, and why and how representation matters. And there's all sorts of studies around perceptions of Black women's pain tolerance, and how that shows up in care delivery. For quite some time, West Michigan had high rates of infant mortality with Black and brown infants, right? And a lot of that is rooted in care, who's caring, and is there trust being built between caregiver and parent, right? So this isn't just a feel-good thing that we're talking about here. It's not just a moral imperative. It directly affects outcomes in life expectancy. So I just wanted to bring those a little bit closer as we talk about this idea of like representation and sense of belonging, and just how, frankly, how fatal it can be. Robyn, Skot, again, want to make space for you all to respond to the question around, what's misunderstood about our needs and wants. No pressure at all. Just want to make space.
So what's misunderstood?
Yeah.
To me, at the foundation of DE&I is something I learned some years ago. There's an ideology in South Africa called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu simply says, I am because you are. And it further says that a human can only be human through other human beings. And to the degree that I marginalize your humanity, I'm less human. But to the degree that I celebrate your humanity, I'm more human. But notice that the value on the perceived is always the same. What it does is it tells you about the perceiver's heart. Right? It tells you it tells me the work that I have to do on myself. If I look, I say, there's a difference between reaching across to someone and reaching down to someone. Right? And so I think the whole thing is that when we talk about DE&I, we can talk, it's funny, I was just on a call today, and they said, they were in the UK. And I said, they were like, we're looking for non-diverse individuals. I'm like, there's no such thing. Because human beings by their very nature are diverse. There's 7.5 billion different manifestations of diversity. Tell me what you're looking for and I can help you get it. Is it generational? Is it orientation? Is it gender? Is it ethnicity? But tell me what it is. But there's no such thing as a non-diverse person. You're not human if you're not diverse, right? And so I think what the whole idea is is to understand that we really are connected, right? And I can go all around the world and see the same thing. When you have communities trying to bring people in, they really are just trying to create space for folks to be themselves, right? And even when organizations, for instance, when I tell folks, if you can actually develop a climate where people can fully show up as themselves, you've actually released greater potential and innovation in your organization. Because to the degree that they have to minimize who they are, is to the degree that you miss out on their genius. And so again, I just go back to square one. Organizations can't afford to not have diversity. They can, but it's at their own peril. And so I simply look at it as, to me, and we talked about it today, it really should be part of an organization's sustainability strategy.
So Skot, can you repeat that? The degree to which people feel like they have to minimize who they are, is the extent they minimize their genius. Did I get that right?
Yes, because here's the thing. If people feel like they can't fully show up because they got to fit into a culture, and the whole idea is that all the cultures I've seen, and that is, it's like, just because something's normal doesn't mean it's healthy. It's just what you've agreed upon.
And normal to who?
Exactly right.
Right.
And I've stepped into a lot of cultures and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, this thing is toxic. You need to shoot it and start over again. Right? And we do, and it takes years. But what I'm saying is when a person can't fully show up, all the gifts and all the things that they can bring to the organization, and they can't be that, I thought that's what you hired them for. Or is that ad, or is that ask for that talent, are you serious about that or not? Because if they have to come through this grid where they have to fit and assimilate, and on the other side, it's just kind of a hologram of who they really are, again, the organization misses out. That's the thing I want people to see. The organization is not where it could be. The organization is not operating in optimal performance because they've created a culture of assimilation, not of innovation. And we can't confuse comfort. Right? We can't mix up comfort and say, well, you're not a fit. Well, that's not really the goal. I thought we wanted to get into a room and exchange ideas and celebrate our difference and solve a bigger problem. So that's where, to me, it's the whole idea is that we have to really understand that this is actually a human opportunity and not an issue.
Human opportunity.
But along those lines, you bring up that psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can't be myself,
you're just not gonna get the best of me. And the thing is too, is that payroll's still going. And I tell people there's a big difference between when people physically leave, right? We see them and they go out the door, they get their little box or whatever, and we call that turnover. But there's something much more insidious at working in organizations, and that's something called turn under. And that's where people quit and stay. And there's lots of that going on here. There's a great resignation, as you mentioned, Bruce. But there's some folks that they resign and they still show up to work in bodily form.
Just a smile.
Right. And if you don't engage them, if you don't check in with them and understand that belonging matters, guess what? You'll never know that they quit.
Scotty, you and I have had conversations along those lines for a long time. So do you feel in West Michigan then that, when I say we collectively know that's a general statement, and sorry, I'm also facilitating the question here. Do you feel though that our companies or our businesses or whatever you want to define it as really truly get that?
Some do.
Some do.
Yeah, some do. And I find, Robyn, that there's organizations that they go after it for different reasons.
Okay, so motivation.
Yeah, so some are getting sued. Okay? Some are fearful of getting sued.
Sure.
And then some actually want to have market innovation. I love working with the third one, but I've worked with all three.
Yeah.
And so I just think that, in West Michigan, I do know, I spoke to some leaders yesterday. I do know that there's some that really, really want to get it. But even to your point, I spent 3 hours in one of our clients yesterday talking about, just justice and Patrick's death and these things. They called me in and I was just talking to a couple of different brands. But then I also have a client where they haven't said anything. And I said, please, for your own sake, do not end up on the wrong side of justice, because the market is going to judge you like never before. There's some moments, just like in the case of George Floyd, I call them T-ball moments. If you know T-ball, it was where the softball was on the little thing, and you just stand there, you hit it when you're ready. George Floyd, in terms of matters of justice, was the T-ball moment for our society. Patrick is a T-ball moment for Grand Rapids. And by the way, when I talk to my friends in London right now and in Namibia, they're like, yeah, so what's going on in Grand Rapids? The Congolese embassy is already here, right? So we've not seen anything yet. And we have an opportunity to be on the right side of justice. This is a T-ball moment for Grand Rapids. And for all the winning that we do and for all the things that we desire, again, I'm here because I love it here. So, but I'm also going to speak the truth about it because I love it. But for all of the winning we want to do, we can't be silent about this issue. What we just saw, right? So when organizations are quiet about that, to me, I know who you are now. And I don't really want my brand working with you anyway, because GBB, we choose who we work with. And so it's one of those things where, to your point, Robyn, I think some are going to get it, and I know how you are. We have our talks about justice and things for years. I mean, some of these organizations are quiet. I'm just like, safe is the new risky.
Do you feel like that so I get what you all saying, but there's also that point of something like this happens, and then we gotta have a workshop. And then you bring everybody in, we have a workshop. So we go, okay, we've had a workshop.
That's right.
Yeah, we all know
Scott is leading.
Yes,
We're experimenting.
And so, but there's that, there's how do you help people realize that it's more than a workshop?
It's just true.
We've talked about a number of different business cases for DE&I. We've talked about social justice. So I want to just toss in another intersection, and that is for those of us who represent employers, right? Our employee value proposition has never been more important than it is today. Your employee value proposition is basically it's your employee promise. It's the promise you make to your employee, right? These are the things that you're going to receive by coming here. Excellent pay, compensation, pay and benefits, remote work. But now, add in social justice,
Yeah.
right? So employees are interviewing, you did a workshop last week, and I'll just be very brief if we're gonna get out of here by 9 o'clock.
We did lock the doors too.
So I surveyed a group of employers, and I just like to do it real quick here. And I said, how many of you are not at 100% of your staffing levels within your organization? Raise your hand.
Wow.
Okay, keep your hands up. Wow. So I'm just gonna move across the room real quick. Mr. Gaddy, what percent, keep your hands up, please. What percentage of your staffing level would you say that you're at right now?
About 70%.
70%. It's not a good number. Wow. Gentleman right here, how about you?
Maybe 85%,
Mm.
but that critical 15% not there.
Yeah.
Joanne, how about you?
About 90%.
Okay.
And then the gentleman right behind you.
I'd say about in that same range, 80–90%.
Okay.
I see you, Carlos, but I'm gonna, but you see the point. I had some folks who were at 60% of their staffing levels.
Yeah.
These are large departments that we're talking about. Your employees prospective employees are interviewing you today.
Yes.
So not only do you have to be nice to employees
Imagine that. Being nice.
but you also have to demonstrate your public commitment.
Yes.
That all of you have talked about,
Yes.
right? Staying silent.
Yeah. Well, and real quick too, Darius, that's fine.
Yeah. Back to you.
So anyway, but so here's the thing, but to your point, is that particularly in terms of generational diversity, digital natives and millennials, they don't simply want to work for a company, they want to work for a mission. It's not just a brand, it's actually a cause. And if you can't articulate that, and if you can't bring, there's no company with a soul, right? They want to find somebody that, they want to go to an organization that has that. And the thing is, I believe every organization has potential to have that. So that's why I believe it's a choice when they don't.
I agree. So Jamon's probably saying that this thing's getting off the rails.
Oh, yeah, we didn't
I'm
get
loving it,
there.
I'm loving it.
But I do want to offer
Conversation.
a practical solution to those of you who are searching for your employee value proposition. Simple email, depending on how large your organization is, Qualtrics survey, SurveyMonkey, whatever.
Yeah.
Ask folks, what are the top 3 reasons that you stay with our organization?
That's it.
That will help you to establish what's important to the folks within your organization. Why do you stay? Those folks who are leaving in an exit interview, ask them why they're leaving, right? And that will help you to determine, to some degree, what's important to folks. And I can guarantee you right now, social justice, the stance you take on social justice will definitely be one of those priorities. At least that's been my experience here in West Michigan. I took a photo a couple of Saturdays ago, and I used it in this talk to demonstrate the change in this community. And the photo was right down on the corner of Monroe and Monroe Center, right? And I took a picture, and what I was trying to capture was Breonna Wade.
Wow.
But right in the immediate backdrop, guess what else I caught? Rosa Parks.
And,
Right.
Little did I know, Patrick would soon follow.
Right. Yeah, man.
But I think the other thing, to your point, when we talked, and it came from the last session, we talked about surveying and the qualitative data and healthcare. It's just like, I get healthcare, but also, you know, what caregivers, what people at home, those are the type of things. If the last 2 years didn't tell us something, show us something, that it was diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, nothing's more inclusive if you see your little child running across the background. You know, those are the things. So we really need to know what our employees, what our colleagues want. So I think, and so many times it's so much easier to go, you know, on this, you know, Qualtrics, is it, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But really, I like that point of getting to know with your employees.
But I will also say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, while yes, you still need to survey and ask your employees, I've had it on the back end where leaders have come up to me and says, yeah, they don't want it, so now what?
Yeah.
Or again, going back to Scotty, when you said, right, there are companies who are missing out on this innovation opportunity, right? And you reminded me of the Korn Ferry study that came out that talks specifically about performance of homogeneous teams. While they will perform extremely high and very well, when you take a team that is not homogeneous, they'll actually underperform for a bit, but then they'll catapult past where homogeneous teams will plateau. But if we can never get to these spaces, especially in West Michigan, to show that and validate that, then what happens is we say homogeneous performance is our standard. And then we start going, why would we want to get messy and go down to get deep, right? And it takes someone with cultural intelligence to orchestrate that diversity. You can't just throw diversity in a room, as you know, because someone has to have that intelligence. So not only does the company have to have a mission or that core, people don't quit jobs, they quit leaders.
Yes, they do.
So then it's a DEI for me is a leadership imperative.
Yeah.
It's not just it's a DEI right on the side. It is truly a leadership imperative. So I have to challenge my leaders to say, even if everyone is saying absolutely not, don't want it, we have to still say, but look at A, B, and C. Where are we going? Because when, not if, but when this is occurring, right? Where are we going to be in that space? The other thing I was going to mention too is on the belongings. Actually, it was Dr. Brandy Lovelady Mitchell, who I adore. When she was doing her work in education, our county's vision is where you belong. So here comes that belonging thing. And it's so hard to qualify because what part of it is intrinsic, what of it is extrinsic. So we created a tool that came off of Dr. Darius Monte's model. And she talks about belonging being this ongoing culture. It has to be ongoing. It doesn't have to check the box. That is intentionally created to make all people feel welcome and belonging across differences. But what she mentions is that there's 4 areas. One of them is physical space, one of them is conversations, one of them is in their written word, and then there's one more, I can't remember, it'll come to me. But what we did is we created a worksheet that you can categorize each one of those and get them to your employers and even your leaders to say in our organization or whatever context you're looking at, fill this out and tell me, current state, right? What makes you feel that you really belong? Oh, when I walk around this hallway, I can wheel my chair through this and it's wide enough. And
So true.
there's some lights and the colors, right? I have trauma and da-da-da-da. Or what, not even just what conversations are you having, but what are the conversations you should be having? Not just what are you having, but what you should be having, right? Oh, the relationships was the 4th one I told you. So, right, so I think those are some really good feedback, practical tools, knowing that yes, not everybody will agree to justice or DEI, but we all know we need to have a connection of belonging. So what is that baseline that we can start understanding? What are we doing well? Where do we need to improve? According to who? So anyway, I didn't mean to get on my soapbox.
But you know what too, with that, Robyn, is that there is, we practice something called strategic benchmarking with our clients. And what I've learned is what we do is we actually throw the net, the best practice net, as far away from that organization's industry as we can get. Why is that? Case in point, I was working with a magazine, and I had to go to two television networks in California. And what they were interested in, one was just interested in benchmarking against their television network industry. The other one was a little bit different, right? But the point is that the industry as a whole was about a 7 out of 10. And so at their best, they would only end up being the best of the worst, right? Because if your industry is lackluster, yay, I'm number 1. Well, I'm sorry, but your industry is like a 5. So strategic benchmarking does this. We can actually throw our net far away over and grab some best practice from Starbucks and bring it in and actually put it in the healthcare system. We can go into Disney and ABC and take that and pull it into the state of Maine for their workforce. Because the point is, because innovation always happens on the fringes. One of the worst places to get a new idea is at an industry conference. It's just true. That's why I go to South by Southwest. I love that because you sit next to a poet and it's the chief marketing officer from American Airlines and an English teacher and the dude from Vice and then this priest that talks to people in pubs in Dublin. You're like, this is an amazing room right here, right? So the point is, as a best practice from Robyn's point, don't just study your industry because your industry may not be as strong as you think it is. Just find a best practice that you love and bring it into your organization and retrofit it. I don't care if it's innovation, you make motorcycles, you manufacture motorcycles, or you might make sandwiches. Find out the best practice you love and then bring it back into your organization and figure out how to retrofit it. Then you end up actually raising the water level for your industry, because a lot of those, I always say that there are a lot of folks, a lot of organizations, everybody wants to be first at being second. And right, what I mean by that is that no one really wants to take risks. They want to wait for someone else to do it first. But the innovator, the pioneers, they're the ones that are like, you know what, I don't have all the answers right. I haven't got it perfect, but we're doing something really, really different. And if you control the language, you control the culture. And so that's where you can find another organization. Just find something that is really amazing and bring it into your organization and retrofit it and say, hey, how do we actually make this best practice fit in our organization? And I guarantee you the brain power is there to figure that out. But cast your net way away from your industry first.
In design, we call that analogous inspiration.
That's right.
So
This talk is worth its weight in gold.
Right.
Loving it.
All checks can be made out to West Michigan Center. I will say, y'all made my volunteer job tonight very easy. I'm like, oh, I gotta ask a question now. This is so conversational. Actually, hyper-specific follow-up question for you, Robyn. You mentioned the study of, you know what I mean? Like, what was the name of that study you used for the notes?
Oh gosh,
Corn Ferry
inclusive
study.
leader, I think is what it is. I can give it as a resource as well.
Okay,
Corn Ferry did a white paper on that, and they showed the two
okay.
graphs on that, and talked about what kind of leaders
Yeah.
need to be had, or what they need to exhibit in order to do change management in that
Okay.
space. So.
And we have some great leaders in this community. I was looking at some of the questions in advance, and some of the names just began to come to me about, you already mentioned Burberry Close, right?
Yeah.
And the change that she has helped to create. Fred Keller, I'm sure many folks know him and the work that he's done pioneering and championing. Steve Peacock, the work everywhere
Yes.
that guy goes, he's bringing inclusivity. So that courageous leadership.
We got some here. To your point, we got some leaders here. We really do.
So we may have time for one more question. All right. So how about we suspend these and let's go straight to the audience, because I'm seeing at least two people here with an appetite for questions. So we'll start with the gentleman and then the lady behind.
I was thinking about your comment about innovation and how you started the presentation addressing how immigrants are welcome to Grand Rapids, to West Michigan in general. And I was thinking about, who do you know who these immigrants are? And what talents they bring to the community. I happen to believe that we are extremely privileged to welcome all these individuals from all over the world. And they happen to come to my office sometimes as seeking their first job, as we have an agency that provides linguistic solutions, interpreting in many, many languages to healthcare organizations. And we take the time to listen to them and get to know and get a feel for these communities. Last night, there was this whole conversation about the very dramatic shortage of healthcare providers and what is going to happen. In the next few years, we are in trouble. We don't have enough people being trained to meet the need of everybody that is leaving, that is retiring, or that are burned out. And I was thinking, recollecting all the information about these immigrants, many of them are healthcare providers.
Yes.
And I wonder if anyone is capitalizing on this opportunity because I see them going to work in factories.
Yes.
And no one is taking advantage of that opportunity. No one is welcoming and getting to know them and trying to understand who they are. They are healthcare providers, they are doctors, they are nurses, they are social workers, they are professional interpreters, all kinds of healthcare providers in general. And it just, it's sad when they give us the notice that they, unfortunately, they can't wait any, I mean, we don't have enough work sometimes for them because the need is on a call basis. And they go and we lose them to a factory, to the back room in Myers or any of these places. And it's such a shame.
So true.
I just want to offer Carlos, ladies and gentlemen, Carlos Powell, a good friend who's done a lot of work over the years in language services, maybe reaching out, and I'm happy to connect you with Teresa Branson and some of the folks at the county who are working on our welcoming plan to see if there's any connectivity there. I would offer that as a place to start.
Well, and our healthcare system does not make it easy. So a lot of times you can be a doctor and actually I'm working with a resident now, NICU doc in Saudi Arabia, husband's an OBGYN from Saudi Arabia, but they have to get then they, like she has to repeat half, like her whole residency, and then so that's 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
And then if she doesn't, then she might have to go, then she has to go back, you know, because she doesn't get her visa. So we don't, and that is a whole, and a lot of that we as a, you know, that's like national ACGME, RRC requirements, things like that we don't necessarily control, but we don't make it easy. So yes, so you were a doctor here, then I gotta make you go do all your training again in the United States.
That's for teachers too.
Yeah, we don't make,
other.
yes, and so many others, so we don't make it easy.
Right.
So I just wanted to add that I've done some work with the Chamber of Commerce, and I know there's a petition of the state legislature to actually relax some of these requirements so that these people can disseminate faster. So
That is excellent.
That's awesome. Thank you. Want to make sure, you had a question in the back, and we'll make sure we get to that before we wrap.
Well, yes, and we heard a lot about healthcare and some, you know, disparities that already exist and how, in essence, healthcare that is evolving in the digital age, you know, digital health, is going to be just healthcare. So my question is, have you seen challenges in recruiting talent or having enough people to employ? And have you seen like the effects of health inequities preventing from having enough of a talent pool? I've been in behavioral health, so I feel like, you know, burnout and mental health challenges and the opioid epidemic have really created some challenges, but all of you and most of you here raised your hands and said that you have shortages. How much does healthcare inequities do you think affect your talent pool?
I think we had a lot of people who said, I'm done. A lot, they said, you know, people, and some of my staff that, oh, I was gonna work 3 to 5 years, now I'm gonna work 2, or I'm done now, when it's, you know, and so those are across the board, that's what we've seen.
Yeah, and I don't know if this answers your question or not, but like, my first thought at least is we continue to ask people, specifically Black and brown people, to join systems that have historically, I don't want to say it, there's been a historical lack of trust and representation and frankly harm, right? And we see that in healthcare, we see it in policing. Like we're asking people to join these systems, and that becomes a very difficult ask. Now I think logically it makes sense, right? Like if you want to shape outcomes, then you probably need to become a part of that thing. But if my sister had negative experiences in healthcare, if my, you know what I mean? Like why would I want to join that system? It just becomes it feels like it becomes like a cycle that is very difficult to spin out of.
And I think really to your point, part of the inequities are real and part are probably perceived. But they both need to be managed. And we can't dismiss someone's experience just because we haven't had that experience, because it's real to them. And a person with an experience is never at the mercy of a person with an argument.
And I just want to add finally, and I promise I'll shut up.
No, please.
From a human resources lens, the young lady just talked about a shortage of healthcare workers. Robyn, I'm not sure if this is the same in Ottawa, but a number of different classifications. We have youth specialists over at our juvenile detention facility. We can't keep folks there. We're running into the same issue with law enforcement. So we're talking about, again, this social justice piece, making sure that we have, deputies on the road, deputies in the jail, We are a great place to work, so anyone looking. Let's talk, but I see this shortage. I'll just leave you with one last story. One of my HR colleagues works for one of our hospitality groups, and this individual was facilitating a meeting, and basically they announced at this meeting, they said, well, I just want to let you all know this is my last time leading this meeting. And so the group of HR folks there, we said, well, where are you going? Nowhere. I'm just done. So, stop eating, and you don't want lights anymore? I mean, there's something happening right now.
Yes.
I know we've talked about the great resignation. Dr. Lowery just said, people are fed up. So we really need to check our mental health. Make sure we're checking our mental health. Talk to your EAP. Reach out when you a black man. I don't do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I've been doing this 18 years, and I've never seen it this bad from a mental health perspective.
That's
Just
across age groups,
Across age groups, ethnicities,
Right.
genders, socioeconomic status, you name it. Yeah, it is, yes.
So I think we're at time. So as we wrap our conversation, no pressure, but might there be any parting words or comments or something you'd like to leave the group with? Maybe an answer to a question that we didn't ask you today. Just anything as we wrap. Or it could just be a
Well, they can ask one more question.
All right, Scott's saying one more question from the group.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I'm sensing people don't want to go home. So we'll go here and then here.
No, I've been in Grand Rapids 10 years. I lived all over the world. I love it here. I grew up in Hawaii, actually, where we didn't have the same problems when I was a kid, so I've seen the other side of it, what it could be. Is there a place outside of work that I can be intentional about making more black and brown friends in a social setting outside of work? And is there value in the community and encouraging people to do that?
Yes, and yes, right? So first of all, you're a part of that and one of the pioneers, and that is Blend is a great organization, which does a lot for the community. Also, I'm trying to think of some other organizations. I'm starting, not because I have the time to do so, but we just need it here, but the chapter of the National Black MBA Association is going to happen here, which has its roots in Atlanta. And I tell you, you know what, and I'm going to make it even simpler than that too. That is, you got people right here, you begin the connection, right? I said the dinner table is the heart of community, right? So you start there, and then through friendships, it just kind of branches out, and it kind of happens in this wonderful sort of way. But I appreciate your intentionality, and that's really what it takes.
I like Ruth Chris.
There you go. So there you go.
First, you got 5 friends.
So Robyn just
Go now.
that's right. Robyn just
You don't need this third lecture.
That's right. That's such an underrated comment. Ruth, Chris, you've got 5 new friends. You heard what Dr. Lowery said. I would also add, in addition to the organizations, like support Black and brown business, right? Like,
Yeah,
just like
it's
some of my favorites personally, Malamai Juice Bar,
Yeah.
40 Acres, Candy Yam, GR Noir,
Yeah, GR Noir.
Lux Preserves,
Yes.
Mosby Popcorn,
Yeah.
Robinson's Popcorn,
Yeah.
Women of Color Give.
Women of Color
Oh,
Give,
Pack Elephant. Yeah, right.
Pack Elephant. You want to talk about Women of Color Give at all?
Yeah, I'll throw it out there. Along the lake shore, there were some women of color who've gotten together who said that we no longer want to be seen as, right, recipients of goodwill, because the stereotype, unfortunately, kind of defaults to that. And that's not to take away from the good things that are being done, but there's that underlying narrative. So a lot of women of color came together and said, you know what, we're going to pool our money together, open up a fund at the foundation, and we're going to start giving into the community in spaces and places that represent, not just in who we give to, but also at the level of leadership that we need to start seeing. So in the first year, we get about 20 grand. Second year is about 40 grand. Third year, we're at almost 60 grand. And it's women who are giving like 25 bucks a month. You know, we're trying to make it really accessible, but we've had people from funders from Greensboro and Oregon, from other places, just pour money into our fund to say, we love what you're doing. You are looking at equity, you're looking at building that network of especially young and up and coming women of color professionals. So yes, if we love to do dinners as well, but if you want to, donate to that fund, yes, thank you.
My pleasure. Last helpful tip that I provide to leaders all the time. I just did it today, Darren. You probably haven't looked at your LinkedIn. I had no idea what Just Air was, right? Went out to LinkedIn.
Cool to see that.
Populating with my social media. So populating your social media with organizations. So it's not a one-off. You can continuously kind of see what's going on with Women of Color Give, WMCAT, whatever it is. I would offer that. I'm a big believer in garbage in, garbage out, right? So I try not to populate my social media with too much garbage in. I try to populate it with things that are meaningful to me and in my life. So.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Great question, great response. You had a question as well.
Yeah, it's got a pseudo question comment, but first of all, I'm really grateful for you all, to meet all you. I am a visitor to Grand Rapids at the corporate department. I come here every other week, and I was gonna say, on a positive note, I've had one of the best experiences I have had in the Black community. I would be specific, like community, Green Clee, Frank Darrell, all those guys, like around there. And I've never seen that. I live in Southwest Detroit, in New York, in other black cities across America. So I would give thumbs up, Burns community, especially Black man in this community. The second thing, Skot, you mentioned about the T-ball kind of analogy, and watershed moments that we have in corporations and our organization. And why that's so important, you also talk about checking out. I know exactly when I checked out my last organization, Ron George Floyd, and the response. They responded, but how long it took them to respond, and also just genuine response to the nature of, we gotta find the best political writing, letter, which took 3-4 weeks, and that was almost worse than nothing. And I definitely checked out, sitting there waiting my next opportunity to get it, just to instead. And I think that's also important, and I love you guys' comments on this, you guys triggered this, is that we talk, what do we do when we first, as a Black man, go to a community barbershop, or what do Black businesses do? Those are the first places we go to, and the mood music in those environments is so important. That's what's going to keep us here, and attract us here. And one, and also tell the other brothers, like, hey, this is a good spot. That's where our culture is. So it's important for us to make sure those businesses are upstanding, there's quality, there's access. So I love your thoughts on that. The mood music that we're in is so important. It's more like the outreach, and make sure you post it. Now, last thing I'll plug in is that this is so dope here. That my fraternity brothers reunion will be. I persuaded them out of Chicago, LA, and New York. Grand Rapids will be on the west side of the so.
That's great, man. That's really cool. Sure. Yeah. Nice to have you here.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like this, like in terms of how important it is to like create those spaces?
It's imperative. It's not, to me, it's a lot of the stuff we're talking about some years ago, you could call it optional. It's not optional anymore. Change or die. right? And that's kind of, you know, Manhattan right now looks really, really interesting because a lot of the stuff in some downtown, they're boarded up. They didn't make it. I can't say that that's the reason they didn't make it, but I will tell you that, man, businesses and organizations can do so much better when they have people around the table that think differently from each other. And even if they disagree, they can disagree in an agreeable way. So that's where it's so important to have those types of spaces. I mean, that's why the mosaic is one of my, Robyn knows, this is one of my most favorite words. Because it is, it's so imperative. And I think when you connect it to business, it gets really exciting. When organizations talk about DE&I as an issue, I'm like, I know, I can kind of predict your future. Because it's not an issue. You know, being caught on a tarmac in an airplane that says we're gonna be here for an hour, right? And you can't do anything about it, that's an issue. But man, DE&I is an opportunity. Who doesn't want more innovation in their business? Right? I mean, that is like breathing pure oxygen. So that's the opportunity. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
And fund it.
Yeah.
Helping
Yeah.
communities, right? Helping
Yes.
communities. You know, it's more than just healthcare, it's the opportunity to
It is.
fully engage and participate while we're here. So,
Yeah.
Darren, I try to use the word dope, my kids tell me.
Your question and comment just made me think of something like super random. So back in 2006, you know, Skot mentioned this, a group of us who were like right out of college, we were 21 years old, and we just didn't see us in spaces. So we started a group called Blend, and it still lives on today. So grblend.org, I would recommend you check that out. But I remember we had an event. It was called Blepardy, right? It was like Black Jeopardy. It was at the United Way building. And we were scrappy, we were 21 years old, we didn't have any money. So like, you know, Sandman's donated the ribs. And then like my grandmother made some green beans, right? You know Shannon Coleman. Anybody here know Shannon Coleman? Author, speaker, phenomenal human being. She's from Detroit actually. She would tell me years later, the reason she stayed in Grand Rapids was my grandmother's green beans. It was like it was a small taste of home that was here, plus the Blend community. And I certainly don't take any credit for Shannon Coleman staying here, but I just bring that up, you know, as a way, like, kind of what you're getting at, just like the barbershop, the places to go, in this case, the green beans. It's a small taste of like familiarity and community and home.
Was that Project Blueprint days?
It was a Project Blueprint day, absolutely.
I remember those.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Just, yeah, I'm not familiar with everything that happens here in Grand Rapids, because I'm from Holland. I'm very big in the Hispanic culture because I come from Mexico, and you know, I know that they have a lot of festivals here where we come and we celebrate. Is there something that takes place here in Grand Rapids that is not just like a celebration for just Hispanic or Asian or
just across the
you know,
board.
just across the board? Is there something that invites other ethnicities in? Because I feel like in our community, there's too many people that are intimidated. You know, there's people that are like, oh, I don't want to, you know, that's their ethnicity, I'm not welcome. Is there something in this community that shines a light on bringing everyone in and including everyone to do something?
So good question. I'm gonna say before you respond, we're gonna close out.
Yes, totally.
So please go ahead and tell everybody know that that's where we're at. If anybody has a response to the question.
To me, you know, Art Prize to some degree is one of those that kind of goes across. I do know that the arts festival is trying to get there. I don't know where they are with it now, but your question is so good and it's so necessary. I don't know of like anything. It's like you have to almost cobble together your experience right now, right? And I think that's why, that's where I think, you know, that's an opportunity. And what I say about West Michigan, if you've got the stomach to pioneer stuff here, you can do really, really well. But you gotta not be afraid to start stuff. you know, and
Well,
I mean.
let's start something.
No, and that's my point, and that's my point, is that I think that's the opportunity. So,
On the Lake Shore, there is a group called The Gathering.
Yes.
So that was intentionally started by a lot of leaders in the community to say, if you're, wherever you're from, right, different background, culture, international, come, everyone brings a dish that they are native to who they are, so they can wear what they want to wear, we have music, so if you need information, I'm happy to get back to you.
Yeah, and finally, it's very fitting. Let's all use our voices to help Confluence to be the best that it can be.
yes.
Right? This is a great space for that, so just want to say thanks to Brian and
Yeah.
maybe just a
Great.
hand for him.
Shout out to That's actually a great place to wrap. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for allowing us to go over. You're still here, which meant you enjoyed the conversation. And shout out to our dope panelists.